Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I wanted to share with you something that is deeply on my heart right now. Um, there's been a lot of talk about. Um, Good morning, Lori. There's been a lot of talk about division, um, bias, racism. Now it's starting to come out in our own liberty movement that some people have detracted for a variety of reasons. I don't think it's any mistake to suggest that Ammon has been quite vocal about the lack of unity that he sees and the issue with him supporting BLM or standing with BLM, I should properly say. And this is not an attack on him by any stretch of the imagination. I think that he's been vital to the movement. He's definitely been out there far beyond most others, and the sacrifices that others really are not sure they're willing to make. So there is a certain amount of respect there that goes there. But it's important when we start walking into activism as things get worse, because what we're going to start finding out is protesting and some of these things have consequences. One of those is like we've seen before in the Idaho State House, where we'll be standing out on the steps, and then somebody that we don't even know comes up with a Nazi flag, and of course KTVB just happens to be there to take that picture. And that's the extent of what that protest looks like. So there's a lot of infiltrations, a lot of agent provocateurs in just about everywhere we go. But today is going to be a rather controversial topic. I've got some information that I wanted to share with you guys about whether white people should support BLM in the name of equality. Okay, this is a very touchy subject. I want to let the information that I have speak for itself. I've got some information written by communists that was actually pulled out of an archive that was shared with me most recently, and I'd like to be able to share those with you. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to share my screen real quick, and I'm going to read with you a couple of things. Hopefully I can find the other thing I was looking for. Let's see. All right, so first I wanted to start by reading you a letter. This was a statement by Julia Brown. It actually appears as part of the motion picture Anarchy USA, which is available on YouTube. She says, "I'm Julia Brown. For 9 years, I was a member of the Communist Party, serving as an undercover agent for the FBI. During that time, I learned that the communist conspiracy had been planning and working for years to bring about a violent revolution to America. It was to be a communist revolution, but the great majority of the American people would not be allowed to realize this until it had already happened. If all goes according to the communist blueprint, Americans will believe that the chaos and violence was something to do with civil rights." Sound familiar, anyone? "Our enemies were quick to find our most vulnerable point for their attack. They knew that the racial difference could provide them with an excellent wedge to divide our people. The strategy simply has been to keep hammering at that wedge, to drive it deeper into the social structure, to open the old wounds that have long since healed, and deliberately to create new ones wherever we can. Now, it doesn't mean that there isn't a legitimate need for the advancement of civil rights for many of our Negro citizens. Of course there's a need there. Otherwise, the communist agitators posing as civil rights leaders could never hope to enlist massive support for their schemes. MLK, sound familiar, guys? The aspiration of the Negroes for full equality were created by the communists. But they were exploited by the communists in such a way that the idealistic Americans of all races can be tricked into implementing the communist blueprint for revolution." Now, this should be huge for us as liberty people to be able to understand exactly how serious this thing is. This is not just something where we need to stand in unity with a particular race. If we stand in unity with this race, arguably, we're going to be used as useful idiots to implement the Communist Party's plan, which is evident by a communist that actually wrote this statement on her own. So, here's another one. The statement of Leonard Patterson, as it appears in the motion picture Anarchy USA. I'm Leonard Patterson. When I was a young man, only 23 years old, I joined the Communist Party. I was a member of the National Executive Committees of the American Young Communist League. In 1930, I was the official communist candidate for election to the New York State Assembly. I knew Gus Hall and other top-ranking American communists very well in those days because I trained with them at the Lenin University in Moscow. I joined the party because I honestly thought that the communists were trying to help the American Negroes. I broke away from the party when it became clear to me that the communists were what they were really up to, and was to use the Negro people in this country as cannon fodder in a violent and bloody revolution aimed at the establishment of an American Soviet dictatorship. It's that simple. And it's still that simple today. Make no mistake about it, what's happening in the United States right now under the banner of civil rights is exactly what happened in China, in Cuba, in Algeria, and many other places around the world. When I was studying communist tactics and strategy in Moscow, my instructors emphasized the importance of using honest grievances and popular slogans as a smokescreen to cover up the true nature of the revolution. We were taught how to use propaganda and arouse emotions of the masses. We learned how to set up one group against the other and how to make them hate each other. We learned that the necessity of having martyrs, and we were even told how to create our own martyrs if they didn't automatically result from the atmosphere of hatred. We were taught the importance of getting large masses of people into the streets for marches and demonstrations. And finally, we were instructed in ways to trigger off riots. And finally, we were instructed on ways to trigger off riots, to make them spread and to keep them going. When I returned to the United States, I was immediately given practical training. I participated in so-called nonviolent demonstrations that were deliberately calculated to irritate white people into violence against us. I personally was in charge of organizing the massive march on Washington to dramatize the Scottsboro Boys case. And then in New York, about 1935, a Negro boy was reported killed by the owner of the store while in the act of stealing some merchandise. Communist Party headquarters decided to make the martyr out of this boy, so we went right back to working out handbills and holding up air meetings. In less than an hour after we started, there was a race riot at 125th Street, complete with smashing windows of white storekeepers, looting, and all the rest. I'm not speaking of things I read about. These are things I personally participated in. Okay? So, when we talk about Martin Luther King, I've been condemned because saying that Martin Luther King was a communist, and how could be a communist if he was a Christian, okay? Here's a little information for you about Martin Luther King. The political leaders and the mass media consistently portrayed King as a champion of nonviolence and an apostle of peace. But in widely distributed article first appearing in October 1965 issue of the American Opinion, JBS writer Alan Stang corrected these and several other false notions about King. Regarding the oft-stated claim that King and his cohorts relied on nonviolence, Stang presented the King strategy as it had been spelled out by King himself on April 3, 1965 issue of Saturday Review. The nonviolent Martin Luther King freely admitted that his strategy relied on creating violence and that it couldn't succeed unless some was created. As recounted in the Saturday Review, the four-step King program called for 1. Nonviolent demonstrations to go into the street and exercise their constitutional rights. Number 2. Racists resist by unleashing violence against them. 3. Americans in conscience in the name of decency demand federal intervention of legislation. Sound familiar? Number 4, the administration under mass pressure initiates measures of immediate intervention and remedial legislation. It's just like the Antifa manual, ladies and gentlemen. As can easily be seen, the King strategy needed violence whose purpose was to gain federal intervention and legislation. These goals had been clearly stated by the two booklets published years earlier by the aforementioned Communist Strategies. The Society then published Alan Stang's paperback, It's Very Simple, The True Story of the Civil Rights. In the 218 pages provided through the explanation of the communist strategy behind the civil rights struggle, named the leader players and their backers, and reported the various organizations working to tear America apart. It's then contained recommended steps to counter the planned conversion of the free United States into a mere portion of the communist-dominated world. Robert Welch wasted no time in promoting that knowledge. So there's a couple of books that I have that are available if you guys want them. One of them I'm actually going to read because I think it's only 7 pages. It's called American Negro Problems, written by a communist himself, Joseph Pepper. And there's another one called The Negroes in Soviet America, also written by communists Ford and Allen. And so a little story behind these is many thousands of copies were sent to JBS members during 1965 and 75 to help demonstrate that the communists were behind the so-called civil rights movement, having them help to be able to expose the movement. So a lot of people don't realize this, or they condemn the John Birch Society for not standing in line with the civil rights movement. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is exactly why. We're not going to stand with somebody because we believe that blacks deserve civil rights, that we're going to support a communist movement to be able to do it. It's ludicrous. And that's the point that I want to make today, is that we don't join with the enemy to be able to try to be able to further their movement. Note that the last sentence in Ford and Allen's booklet, Join the Communist Party, helped to create the powerful great vanguard which is leading the mass of the world to socialism. Now, we have to remember that the USSR, which is Russia, right, was the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, okay? Communism enforced socialism. Socialism, whose originator was Karl Marx, was the goal of the 20th century and still is the goal today. It is promoted by Bernie Sanders, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and the growing number of enemies of the country and even some members of Congress. Consider the surprising conclusion. Socialism is more dangerous than communism. Communism seeks to gain control militarily, and it keeps control with the KGB-type national police, which they are advocating presently. The people still oppose what they have been given and have to be forcibly controlled. Socialism gets the people to vote themselves into total government, and then when the people vote that way, they are defeated by their own choices and don't resist. Can you believe this? Where are we today, guys? Hence, socialism is more dangerous to any nation. American universities and high schools are preaching socialism, and our country is paying the dear price already for what's being taught to the young Americans by socialist professors and the rotten media mass. So, I want to be able to shift gears to you guys for that. Hopefully that you guys found that interesting. And I want to shift gears over to, I think I read that one already. So this is 7 pages. Okay, I'm going to actually, once this is done on Facebook, I'm going to go ahead and transfer this over to YouTube, and then it will be on Anchor on my podcast, so you can listen to it on Anchor or any of those social media platforms. This small booklet is called American Negro Problems. Sounds kind of offensive, doesn't it? Well, it's not meant to be. It's actually written by the communists that the black people actually support, which is why it's important to read this. It was published as a pamphlet by the Workers' Library Publishers in New York, 1928. And if you look on the bottom, the website is www.marxists.org. So I don't anticipate this being taken down from the internet. American Negro Problems by John Pepper. Forward. The communists fight for the Negro cause. Two major capitalist parties. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to share this so you guys can see it. Hopefully you can see that. The two major capitalist parties, the Republican and Democratic, and their small brother, the Socialist Party, have unwritten gentlemen's agreement on the Negro question. According to the Sacred Gentleman's Agreement, which is no capitalist politician has dared to violate in the present election campaign, there is no Negro question in the United States. There are no problems of social or political equality, no questions of discrimination against the Negro masses. During the whole course of the election campaign, there has only been a political party which has the courage to violate this gentleman's agreement to keep a deathly silence on the Negro question. The Workers' Communist Party of America has come out in its election platform and its whole election struggle as the fearless champion of the Negro masses. The southern states are stirred up by the political struggle of the communist speakers and the organizers for the Negro masses. Communist anti-lynching leaflets are being distributed everywhere. The candidates of the Communist Party are everywhere putting up courageous fight for the full social and equality of the Negro race. The meetings of the Communist Party have been broken up in Arizona and Texas and Delaware and in the southern states because the communist spokesmen dared to tackle the Negro question and were bold enough to be able to call Negro workers to their meetings. The Ku Klux Klan, the American Legion, the forces of police, and other organs of the government terrorism are mobilized everywhere against the communists because the Communist Party is the only one of the working class and of the oppressed Negro masses. One, if not the most outstanding feature of the election campaign of 1928 is the fact that the communist speakers, organizers, and candidates for president, vice president, and governor are being jailed everywhere because of their uncompromising struggle for the Negroes. To this belief forward and following essay on some of the basic Negro problems in America, we wish to add the principles demanded for the oppressed Negro masses as embodied by the platform of the Workers' Communist Party of America. See if any of these are familiar. Number one, the abolition of the whole system of race discrimination, full racial, political, and social equality for the Negro race. Abolition of all laws which result in segregation of Negroes, abolishing all Jim Crow laws. The law shall forbid all discrimination against Negroes in selling and renting houses. Abolition of all laws which disenfranchise the Negroes. Abolition of laws forbidding intermarriage of persons of different race. Abolition of all laws which... Oh, okay. Okay, so number 5... abolition of all laws and public administration measures to prohibit or practice or prevent Negro children of the youth from attending general schools and universities. Full and equal admittance for Negroes in all railway station waiting rooms, restaurants, hotels, and theaters. Federal law against lynching and protection of Negro masses and the rights of self-defense. Abolition of the discriminating practices in courts against Negroes, no discrimination in jury service. Abolition to convict lease systems and of the chain gang. Abolition of the Jim Crow distinction in the Army, Navy, and Civil Service. Intermediate removal of all restrictions in trade unions against the membership of Negro workers. Equal opportunity employment wages, hours, and work conditions for Negroes and white workers. Equal pay for equal work for Negro and white workers. Doesn't sound too bad, right? American Negro Problems. The Negro question in America must be treated in its relation to the liberation struggle of the proletariat against the American imperialist. Sounds like Marxism to me. The struggle against white oppression of the Negro masses is a part of the proletarian revolution in America against capitalism. The American working class cannot free itself from capitalist exploitation without freeing the Negro race from the white oppression. What Marx said about the United States is still true. Labor cannot emancipate itself in white skin where in the black it is branded. At the same time, the Negro question in the United States of America must be treated in its relations to the huge Negro masses of farmers and workers oppressed and exploited by the white imperialism in Africa and South America. The Negroes of the United States are the most advanced section of the Negro population of the world and can play a divisive role in helping to lead the liberation movement of the Negro colonies. Within the Negro population of the United States, the Negro working class is destined to be the vanguard of the liberation movement that may become the vanguard of the liberation movement of the Negro peasant masses on an international scale. Let's see. The Negro proletariat appears. The industrialization of the agrarian South of the United States, the concentration of the new Negro working class population in the big cities and the East and the North, and the entrance of the Negroes into the basic industries on the mass scale have been changing in the last few years the whole social composition of the Negro race in America. The appearance of a genuine Negro industrial proletariat creates an organizing force for the Negro race, furnishes a new working class leadership to all Negro race movements, creates the possibility for Negro workers under the leadership of the Communist Party to assume the hegemony of the Negro liberation movement, strengthens immensely the fighting possibilities for the emancipation of the Negro race, and increases the importance of the Negro question for the revolutionary struggle for the American proletariat. American imperialism oppresses in the most terrific way nearly 11 million Negroes, who constitute not less than 1/10 of America's country's total population. White capitalist prejudice considers the Negro race a lower race, the born servants of the lofty white masters. The racial caste system is a fundamental feature of the social, industrial, and political organization for the United States. The Workers' Communist Party of America, in its fight against imperialism, must recognize clearly the tremendous revolutionary possibilities of the liberation movement of the Negro people. Today, the Solid South, the millions of Negro farmers of the Black Belt living under the most oppressive conditions, half feudal, half slave, Lenin, constitute one of the props of the American imperialism. It is the basic duty of the Communist Party to develop all revolutionary possibilities for the Negro race, or of the Negro race, to transform the Solid South and the Black Belt for the reserves of forces for the bourgeois into reserves of forces for the proletariat, Stalin. The Communist Party must consider itself not only the party of the working class generally, but also the champion of the Negroes as an oppressed race, and especially the organizer of the Negro working class elements. The Communist Party cannot be a real Bolshevik party without being also the party of the liberation of the Negro race from all white oppression. The Solid South, an American colony. The Negro tenant farmers, sharecroppers, and the agricultural workers of the South are still, despite all pompous phrases of freeing the slaves, in a status of virtual slavery. They have not the slightest prospect of ever acquiring possession of the land on which they work. By means of the usurious credit system, they are chained to the plantation owners as firmly as plantation slaves. Peonage and contract labor are the fate of the Negro cotton farmers. The bankers of the East and the South are increasingly becoming the landowners. The landowners, who are at the same time the merchants, having a monopoly of the marketing of the crops of the Negro, tenant farmers, and of the government in the South, rule over the Negroes with a merciless dictatorship. The most backward half-feudal, half-slave methods of exploitation by the plantation owners are merged with the South with the most modern forms of capitalist exploitation by the huge trusts and banks of the financial capital. No other section of the American toiling masses feels the ruthless capitalist dictatorship of much vaunted American bourgeois democracy more than the oppressed Negro masses. The Negroes of the South are disenfranchised politically. Sheer force prevents the Negroes from exercising their so-called political rights. Lynch law is the law over the Negroes. The terror of the Ku Klux Klan is the constitution for the Negroes. Most infamous segregation policies prevail everywhere against them. The white masters try to reduce the Negroes to illiteracy. The Black Belt of the South, with its starving and pauperized Negro farmers, and the Negro agricultural working masses with its Jim Crowism, is a semi-feudal status, and its political system, still bearing the early marks of the period of slavery, constitutes virtually a colony within a body of the United States of America. The super profits extracted from this Negro colony are one of the most important sources of growth of the American imperialism. The oppression of the Negro race is one of the most important bases of the government apparatus of American capitalism. The prejudices created in the minds of these large sections of the white workers against the Negroes are the most dangerous obstacles to the unity of the American working class. Class differentiation of Negroes. A sharp class differentiation has taken place in the Negro population in recent years. Formerly, the Negro was in the main of the cotton farmer in the South and the domestic help in the North. The peasantry, the Negro farm owners and sharecroppers, the Negro tenant farmers, and the agricultural workers are still the largest stratum in the Negro race. Out of the 8 million Negroes in the South, there are 6 million still on the land. In the big cities and industrial centers of the North, they are concentrated to a growing degree in the Negro working class population. There are already 1.5 to 2 million Negroes in the industry of the North. At the same time, there's a rapid development of a Negro petit bourgeois, a Negro intelligentsia, and even a Negro bourgeoisie. The very fact of the segregation of the Negro masses creates the basis for the development of the stratum of small merchants, lawyers, physicians, preachers, brokers, who try to attract Negro workers and farmers as consumers. There is no Negro industrial bourgeoisie. Predominance of the white trusts restricts the young and weak Negro bourgeoisie to the fields of the trade and the second-rate banking. It would be a major mistake to overlook the existence of class differences among the Negroes, especially the crystallization of the Negro bourgeoisie. There were in 1924 73 Negro banks carrying an average volume of a business over $100 million. There are 25 insurance companies, 14 of these has assets totaling $6 million, and during 1926 alone paid over $3 million in claims. This Negro bourgeoisie is closely tied up with the white bourgeoisie, is often an agent of the white capitalists. Economically, the Negro banks are often part of the Federal Reserve System of banking. Politically, the Negro bourgeoisie is participating to a growing degree in the so-called commissions of the interracial cooperation. These committees exist in 800 countries of the South and are spreading all through the Black Belt. But the ideological and organizational barrier of the national racial movement of the Negroes is today rather the intelligentsia and petite bourgeoisie. Proletarianization and pauperization of the farmer. There is a growing process of disintegration going on among Negro farmers. Ever larger sections are transformed into agricultural workers, 2 million, and hundreds of thousands of Negro farmers and agricultural workers desert their lands to migrate to the big cities and the industrial centers. This migration is not only to the industrial centers in the big cities of the East and the North, but also the rising industry centers of the South. There is even the migration from the plantations to the villages of the South, where there is a non-agrarian Negro population of about 2 million. Lenin pointed back in 1913 as one of the foremost characters of the southern rural areas, the fact that that its population is deserting it. This disintegration of the Negro peasantry means partly proletarianization of the Negro sharecroppers and partly pauperization of the Negro masses. In the past, the South has had a stratum of poor whites. Today, it is developing a new stratum of poor blacks, driven completely outside the process of the production. The Southern plantation owners and their government have tried to hold the Negro farmers and agricultural workers in the southern cotton fields by force, but even their brutal terror has not been able to stop the mighty migration of the cotton plantations to the industrial centers. This migration is an unarmed Spartacist uprising against the slavery and oppression by the capitalist and feudal oligarchy. The Negro has fled from the South, but what he has found in the North. He has found in the company towns and individual centers of the North a caste wage slavery virtually not better than the contract slavery in the South. He has found crowded, unsanitary slums. He's exchanged the old segregation for a new segregation in the worst sections of the cities. He's doing the most dangerous, worst-paid, unskilled work in the steel, coal, and packing industries. He's found the racial prejudice of the narrow white labor aristocracy which refuses to recognize the unskilled Negro worker as his equal. He has found that the treachery and the bureaucracy of the AF and L, which refuses to organize the Negro workers into trade unions, He has found betrayal by the renegade Socialist Party, which capitulated completely to white chauvinism. The lynchings of the South have had their counterpart in the race riots in the East. The employing class deliberately arouses the racial hatred and prejudices of the white workers against the Negro workers with the sinister aim of splitting and dividing the ranks of the workers' class, thereby maintaining the exploitation and oppression of both the white and the Negro workers. The slogan of self-determination. The Workers' Communist Party of America puts forward correctly in its central slogan, abolition of the whole system of race discrimination, full racial, social, and political equality for the Negro people. But it is necessary to supplement the struggle for the full racial, social, and political equality of the Negroes with the struggle for their right of national self-determination. Self-determination means the right to establish their own state, to erect their own government if they choose to do so. In the economic and social conditions and class relations of the Negro people, there are increasing forces which serve as a basis for the development of the Negro nation, a compact mass of farmers on a contiguous territory, semi-feudal conditions, complete segregation, common traditions of slavery, and the development and distinct classes and economics ties, etc., etc. It is true the Negro people in the United States have not had their own language as distinct from the language of the oppressing white nation, but there is a certain amount of special Negro culture. There is still alive the common, deep-rooted tradition of the bitter centuries of slavery. There is developing a new Negro literature and press. First of all, we must consider the compact Negro farming masses of the Black Belt and the potential basis for the national liberation movement of the Negroes as a basis for the realization of the right of self-determination of the Negro state. Despite the growing migration to the North, in 1920 there were still over 3 million Negroes who constituted a majority of the population in 219 counties over a contiguous area in the Black Belt. There are many national movements of the Negro city, polite bourgeoisie, and intelligentsia. The fact that the most important mass movement of the kind, the Garvey movement, was a sort of Negro Zionism and has such reactionary, extremely harmful slogans as leaving the United States and back to Africa should not blind us to the revolutionary possibilities of the Negro national liberation movements of the future. It is unquestionable that, first of all, that the Negro farmers can be a basis for the Negro national liberation movement of the future, despite the fact that today the Negro farming masses of the South are so oppressed that they do not yet show any signs of national awakening. The Negro national liberation movement has tremendous revolutionary potentialities. Despite the fact that at the outset its barrier will likely be the rural and urban petite bourgeoisie. Lenin had stated that there can be no doubt that all nationalist movements cannot be but bourgeoisie democratic movements. But the knowledge of this fact did not prevent Lenin and the CI from recognizing the tremendous, unexhausted, revolutionary possibilities of the national liberation movement and the colonies and oppressed nations of the races generally. As the national liberation movement continues to grow, the Negro proletariat will play an increasing role in it and will struggle for the hegemony over it. There is a certain amount of assimilation going on among the Negro industrial workers in the North and the East, and the Negro workers workers shoulder to shoulder with the white worker in the factories and the plants. But at the same time, it is necessary to recognize that there is practically no social contract between these workers. The social and residential segregation of the Negro workers in the North is complete and manifests an increasing tendency. Veritable Negro cities are being created in Harlem, New York, on the south side of Chicago. The segregation of the Negro working class creates an economic basis for the development of a Negro petite bourgeoisie, even in the North and the East, which loads additional exploitation onto the blacks of the Negro workers as a result of the distinct development, strengthens the basis for the Negro national movement in the North and the East. The Workers' Communist Party of America must come out openly and unreservedly for the right of the national self-determination of the Negroes. But at the same time, the Communist Party must state sharply that the realization of the self-determination cannot be secured unless the present relations of power under capitalism. National self-determination for the Negro is the bourgeois democratic demand, but it can be realized only in the course of the proletarian revolution. The abolition of the half-feudal, half-slave remnants in the South will be only a byproduct, Lenin, of the general proletarian revolution. It would appear a major mistake to believe that there can only be any other revolution in imperialist America, in the country of the most powerful, most centralized, and concentrated industry, than a proletarian revolution. The Communist Party of America must recognize the right of national self-determination for the Negroes and must respect their own decision about the form of the realization of this self-determination. The Negro Communists should emphasize in their propaganda the establishment of a Negro Soviet Republic against white chauvinism. Not only the labor aristocracy, but the large sections of the American working class as a whole are permeated with white chauvinism. White chauvinism reflects itself in various forms, even in some sections of the Communist Party itself. Individual comrades, and even in the same local organizations, have yielded occasionally to the racial prejudices of the white workers and retreated instead of waging a courageous struggle against it. Gary, Detroit, St. Paul, Harlem. The CEC, of the Communist Party of America, stated in its resolution of April 30th that the party as a whole has not sufficiently realized the significance of the work among the Negroes and that such work should be considered not a special task for Negro comrades, but one as a special revolutionary task of every communist of a whole party. It is imperative to begin outside and inside the Communist Party a relentless campaign of self-criticism concerning the work among the Negroes. All signs of white chauvinism must be ruthlessly uprooted from within the ranks of the Communist Party. In this aggressive fight against chauvinism, the party must carry on a widespread and thorough education campaign, with the party utilizing for this purpose to the fullest possible extent the party schools, the party press, and the party platform to stamp out all forms of antagonism or even indifference among the white comrades towards the Negro work. This education work should be conducted simultaneously with the broad campaigns to draw the white workers and the poor white farmers into a struggle for support for the demands of the Negro workers and tenant farmers. Thus, BLM and Antifa. The struggle against white chauvinism must be combined with the struggle for genuine internationalism in the ranks of the working class and the ranks of the Communist Party. The Communist Party of America must emphasize in all of its campaigns the solidarity of the white and black workers. In the ranks of the Communist Party, there can be no place for nationalism. The Communist Party must be the party of internationalism. Tasks of the Communists in Negro work. The appearance of a Negro industrial proletariat on a growing national mass scale makes it imperative that the main emphasis of the party work should be placed on these new proletarian forces. The Negro workers must be organized under the leadership of a Communist Party and drawn into joint struggle together with the white workers. Communist Party joining in with the white workers. The party must understand how to link up national demands for Negroes with the economic and political struggles of the poor farmers. Much more emphasis than before must be laid on the trade unions' organization of the Negroes. This party must penetrate all existing Negro trade unions. It is the basic task of the Communist Party to organize the Negroes into trade unions. In all the work of the organized and unorganized carried underneath the leadership of the Communist Party, we must insist upon the inclusion of the Negro workers, inclusion with the Negro workers and the white workers in newly organized trade unions. In the existing trade unions, the party must fight for the admittance of Negro workers. Where the labor bureaucracy refuses to admit Negroes, it is the duty of the Communist Party to organize Negro trade unions. At the same time, the principle of the union for each industry, embraced white as well as Negro workers, should be the aim of the Communist Party. The importance of the trade union work imposes special tasks upon the TUEL. The TUEL has neglected the work among Negroes, notwithstanding the fact that these workers are objectively in a position to play a very big part of carrying through the program of organizing the unorganized. The greater contact must be established between the TUEL and the Negro masses. The TUEL must become the champion of the rights of the Negroes in the old unions and in the organization of new unions for Negroes and whites, as well as separate Negro unions. It is one of the biggest tasks for the Workers' Party to extend its activities to the Solid South, the beginning of which has been made in the election campaign. The party was not able to carry on any work among Negro farmers and agricultural workers of the Black Belt. It is the duty of the party to study and analyze the conditions of the Negro farming masses, to work out demand to meet their situation, to organize special Negro farmers organizations, as well as organizations for the agricultural workers. It is necessary that the party should establish new district organization in the South, especially in the most important industrial centers. The party organizations in these industrial centers of the South should be bearers of the education and organizing work of the party among the Negro farmers and agricultural workers. The fight against segregation, lynching, political disenfranchisement of the Negroes must be organized. It is necessary to help the Negro masses to organize themselves for attractive resistance and self-defense against the lynching terror of the Ku Klux Klan and similar terroristic gangs of the white bourgeoisie. The ILD, which so far has almost completely neglected the work of the Negro masses, has hereafter put in the forefront of its propaganda, agitation, and activities energetic campaigns against lynching and juridical oppression of the Negroes. The communists must participate in all national liberation movements of the Negroes which have a real mass character. The existing national organizations and movements of the Negroes are today under the domination of the Negro petite bourgeoisie and even their bourgeoisie. The aim of the Communist Party must be to fight for the hegemony of the working class elements in the national liberation movement. The basic task of the communists is to form a working class of organizations for the Negro proletariat and the agricultural workers and farmers organizations, for the Negro farmers to turn these organizations into energetic, integral forces of its whole class struggle. The communists must not forget the movement in the struggle for the national liberation of the Negro includes the relentless struggle against the Negro bourgeoisie in the struggle against the influence of the petite bourgeoisie over the Negro proletariat. It is permissible to form a united front, for example, forming the Negro Race Congress, of the working class elements in the petite bourgeois elements. The policy of the communists within this united front must be A, to free the working class from the ideological and organizational influence of the petite bourgeois elements, and B, to begin the struggle for leadership of the working class. The communists must bear in mind that the alliance of the Negro working class with the Negro petite bourgeoisie can be maintained only under the following conditions. A, the revolutionary fight of the petite bourgeoisie for Negro race demands against the American imperialism. B, no obstacles by the petite bourgeoisie against the special class demands an organization of time Negro workers and exploited farmers. The communists must under no circumstances merge their organization with the petite bourgeois or the other organizations and reserve for themselves the fullest rights of criticism and propaganda. The American Negro Labor Congress, which is still very weak, must be reorganized and activized. The communists working with this organization should try to make it serve as an intermediary mass organization, as a medium through which the party can extend its work among the Negro masses and mobilize the Negro workers under its leadership. After careful preparatory work, which must be stated at once, Another convention of the American Negro Labor Congress should be held. For this convention, a carefully worked out program should be prepared. It should contain not only the demands of the Negro workers, but also the agrarian demands of the farmers and agricultural workers. The Negro Miners Relief Committee and the Harlem Tenants League are examples of the United Front organizations which may be set up as a means of drawing the Negro masses into struggle. But these organizations can be considered only as the beginning. The communists working with these organizations should try to broaden them, and similar committees should be organized in other Negro centers. In every case, the utmost effort must be made to combine the struggle of the Negro workers with that of the white workers, to draw the white workers' organization into such united fronts. One of the greatest shortcomings of the work of the American Party among the Negroes is the lack of sufficient party cadres among the Negro comrades. The next and most important task of the party is in respect to the selection and education of the cadre of the Negro communist workers. The proletariat character of the Negro Party leadership must be brought forward to more clearly than before. At the same time, the proletarian Negro intellectuals must be utilized to the full. It is imperative to utilize all party schools in the USA and broaden to train Negro comrades as leaders for special work among the Negro farming masses. The activities of the Negro comrades should not be confined exclusively to the work among Negroes, but they should participate in the general party work. Simultaneously, white comrades must be specially trained among the Negroes. The Negro Champion must be published regularly. Every effort must be to develop it into the mass organ of the Negro workers and communist farmers, or working farmers, sorry. In general, the general party press must be utilized to its full extent for propaganda among the Negroes. A regular Negro news service must be built. The utmost effort must be made to attract Negro workers and Negro agricultural laborers as members to the Communist Party. The present Negro membership of the Communist Party is inadequate to fulfill the greater tasks before it. A special recruiting campaign for Negro workers should be initiated in connection with the general economic and political campaigns of the party. In the present election campaign, wherever possible, Negro communist candidates should be nominated in important Negro centers. The Negro question in the United States must be treated in its relation to the general international Negro problem. The question of a Negro World Congress should be considered, but it can be realized only if the Negro working class leadership in the Congress can be secured. One aim of the purpose of the work among the Negroes in the USA should be to organize them as the champions of Negroes all over the world against imperialism. A strong Negro movement in the USA will enable to influence and direct the Negro movement in all of those backward parts of the world where Negroes are oppressed by the various imperialist powers. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. I think we've substantiated enough evidence helping people understand the connection between blacks, or as John Pepper, the communist that they support, refers to as Negroes, were actually used along with the white people to be able to further the communist agenda. At some point in time, I will be reading the other book that talks about the Negroes in the socialist America. But that should be enough to be able to help explain the case I was trying to make for today. So I hope that you guys found that enjoyable, enlightening, enlightening. And if you want a copy of the documents that I have, I'd be happy to share that folder with you. One book, the Negroes in the Soviet America, is probably is about 16 gig. So what I wanted to be able to say finally is that the fight for this country by patriots is done in a variety of different ways, right? Some people do it politically within a certain framework. Some people do it behind the keyboard. Some people do it in front of a camera, like I do amongst every other way. But the other part is to be able to recognize not only how you feel and what you believe is right, but to be able to understand the enemy enough so that you can be armed enough with the information, with the agenda that you are trying to be able to build, to be able to have success in the way that you plan on doing it. So in this particular case, is Ammon wrong in what he's doing in support of BLM or standing with BLM against the abuse? I think that's a case that you guys are going to have to make on your own. I personally understand a totalitarian police state. I don't support a totalitarian police state, but I also can't stand with the communists in an effort to be able to pull something like that off, because as I've shown you in this book, it's exactly what the communists want you to do. And we're all aware of divide and conquer, right? We're all aware that they're trying to divide us, and what we're trying to do is to be able to recognize that divisiveness and to be able to reach out to the average black man or the average whoever. There's no crime in that. For us to be for this slavery and the racism thing that they continue to bring up, how dare they do that? But the problem is that we're focusing on such a small scale, we're not pointing out who's actually doing it. We want to be able to send mixed messages to people that have no real idea about what we're doing. They have no idea how educated you are. They have no idea how educated I am. They have no idea about about what we read. They don't have any idea about what is in our head on how we want to be able to implement an agenda, because nobody asks. I was ridiculed yesterday and called it, what I was sharing with you was BS yesterday, because there's no way that Martin Luther King was a communist. I've proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that the fact that the media has perpetrated this guy into a Jesus. And here's the thing to walk away from, okay, for some of you that think I'm crazy. When in the history of America has the American government and the media ever hailed somebody that had angelic qualities? And who have they normally elevated instead? Nelson Mandela? Oh, because he was a freedom fighter? Nobody even talks about the fact that he was the one that created necklacing. Do you know what that is? That's when they put a tire around your neck and they fill it with gasoline, they light it on fire. Yeah, that's him. That's the freedom fighter, okay? Everybody that our government supports does more to support communism than they do to support Americanism. Look what happened with China and Chiang Kai-shek and Mao Zedong, right? Every time you look at it, whoever they end up supporting, or whoever Time Magazine ends up supporting as a leader for the free world, is a Marxist. And so why would this be any different, I ask you? Anyway, I've made this go on longer than I needed to. I wanted to make the point. Again, I think that liberty is fought in a variety of different ways. The last thing I wanted to leave you is that when you end up becoming part of a movement, and this is something I've learned in my 12 years of activism, perception, people will say, well, I don't care what people think. Yes, you do. You care what people think. And you kind of better care what people think, because in order to be able to get people to be able to join you, you have to have them care and understand what you're trying to do. Therefore, perception becomes a huge part of the problem. If you are perceived as some fringe element, right, how big of a following are you actually going to get? And what kind of people are you going to have follow you? You're going to have the fringe element follow you because they're the only ones, or the fringe element follow you because they're the only ones that understand you. So I explain it this way, and maybe I'm sort of challenged here when I say this, but for any of you guys that have been in school, there's the smart kid in school, right? And then there's the dumb kid in school, right? Like dumbbell math, right? How fast is that class going to be able to advance? Is it going to be able to advance at the speed of the person in the front of the class, or the speed of the one at the back of the class? Well, it's actually going to only go as fast as the person in the back of the class. And that's the way our system is designed today. If I had to try to bring those two together to be able to show what I'm talking about, because I often confuse people like I confuse myself, is the fact that we can, if we want to be successful in a movement, we need to have people clearly be educated, number one, and to be able to clearly understand where somebody is coming from. To be able to draw other people in that have not yet perceived us the way that we hope to be perceived, and to be able to make that bridge. So in my view, communication is hugely important because we want people to be able to understand what we're saying. We want people to be able to see that our worldview is consistent. We want them to be able to know if we're trustworthy, if we are going to be able to lead them astray, if, you know, what they can count on. When they get involved in a particular movement with one of us, that question in the back of our mind is, how crazy is this guy? And is somebody in this movement going to be doing something that is going to cause harm that they don't know about? Or are they going to endanger others? Or perhaps am I going to be in a place where I don't necessarily know that I want to be? So those are all things that I would like to be able to bring forward to you guys and have you consider. I have no enmity with anyone. My job and my desire as a human being is to be able to align with as many people as I can, and to work with others in the restoration of liberty. But there are many ways to be able to triangulate that end. We don't all necessarily need to do a frontal assault. And so I don't think anybody should be discriminated against, especially in the liberty movement, which doesn't need any more fragmentation, to realize the fact that just because I may not follow you or somebody may not follow you, don't take it personal. But I think that the relationships should continue to be made. So if any of you think that I speak out of line, I've told you repeatedly, call me, email me, and call me out. Tell me that you think I've gone sideways. Tell me that you think that there's things I'm going to learn. Although I'm reading and I sound like I'm smart to some people, I'm always learning. And the day that I am so arrogant to the point where I'm going to shut off what anybody tells me is the day that nobody should see my face. So you guys have a great day. I hope you found that thing of interest to you. If you need a copy of that, please feel free to reach out to me, and I'll make that happen for you. So I appreciate it. You guys have a good day.